How does UX strategy fit in the org? Dun dun dun. So the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. Michael Porter, everyone's gonna reference this guy. He's the one who kind of invented this like competitive advantage approach to strategy. So choosing what not to do, that's super important. But it's easier for us as designers when we're designing a strategy, we're pretty low on the totem pole. We're also having a nice starting point many times because there are often higher order strategies than the ones we're creating. So there's things above us, we're aligning upwards with them. And that means we're not doing things that don't align with our current business strategy. Think of strategy, your mission, your vision, your business, your product strategies. Think of it like a flashlight. Like it's shining somewhere, and where it shines is where you're focusing. You shouldn't focus on where you're not shining because you're trying to make these big system moves. And when you don't focus and you don't follow, and you don't align upwards, things can get a little bit lost. And this is why you might need a UX strategy, is because things get sort of passed down, almost like the game of telephone. So, like the business strategy starts up here, handed to the products and marketing, so they split there. And then the design lead of product, they sort of get the direction. And then by the time they give it to the regular designers, they're like maybe going the exact opposite of the business strategy. Things can get a little bit out of hand. So I'm going to assume that you're here. I'm not going to get into like content strategy or growth strategy or things like that. We're going to talk about UX strategy, which puts you here. I'm going to make that assumption. But the process and most of everything I'm going to talk about would apply if you're a designer making a business strategy. Maybe you call yourself a business designer, a strategic designer. It's the same process, or at least this is a process you could follow that I'll get into. So the biggest thing to talk about if we're saying, okay, we're going to create a UX strategy, maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, I'm a product designer. Can I make a product strategy? And my answer would be sure. But I think you need to understand a little bit more context before you do. This is one of the most recently popular articles on product strategy. And I like it because it kind of also uses this objective strategy tactic framework that I like. This helps me understand it. And it's nice to see other people using it. It's quite popular, I think. You can see that product strategy sits below the company or like the business strategy and below the mission. And then the things that it creates, the actual tactics and deliverables, is the product roadmap and the product goals. Now, as a UX designer, those product goals might be your objectives, and that might be where your strategy starts. But you need to understand where you fit into the org. So, in the order of strategies, the ones you should probably know about, the ones you might need to care about, there are plenty more. There's like, if there's a title, there's a strategy to go with it. But these are the ones I think that are super important for UX designers, product designers, UI designers, anybody working in that sort of realm. So this is the strategy stack. This is what I would say are the things that are important for you. So take note of these. Product strategy is above UX strategy because usually the design team sits under the product team. Not always the case, but if you are sitting under the VP of product, if that's ultimately your boss, you're sitting under the product strategy. And in general, you want to align with the product strategy and you want to align with the mission. You want to align with the business strategy. What do those mean? Mission vision is why the company exists most of the time. I'm just trying to give you as close as possible. It may be slightly different. The business strategy here, we talk about classically where we're going to compete. Oftentimes, that is where the business strategy is dealing with. So it's a little bit bigger. So you see why the company exists. You're already talking about a bigger thing, getting a little smaller, where we'll compete, and then what problems we will solve, ideally. Maybe your product strategy is like, you need to build this. Sometimes it can be a little bit like that. That may not be the best for you, but it's a reframe here. What problems we will solve. This is ideal. I kind of looked to Marty Kagan for the way to think about this. So I recommend sending that to your product manager. He's got a lot of stuff on product strategy. Also Roman Pickler. So those people are helpful in finding about that, what problems we will solve, and then how we will solve those problems. UX strategy, this is what you're trying to answer. How we're going to solve the problems we've already decided we're going to work on. And there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of unknowns there. Like, let's say that your roadmap is to deliver an app in iOS and in Google and Android, iOS and Android. Well, there's a lot of how left in just delivering that app. You got to know what that app looks like. You need to know how, like, are you going to have a design system? What's the approach? The how is a huge area. So there's lots of room for strategy down there at the UX strategy stack. But one thing to keep in mind is the most likely the owner of these things. So be aware of these people because you're going to have to work with these people. You need to be partnering with these people if you want to make this kind of strategy. You've got the UX lead, maybe the UX manager, whoever the most experienced UXer is on your team is most likely going to be the one you need to work with for the UX strategy. The VP of product is the one that owns the product strategy. Product designer is feeding insights, feeding the learning that might go into a product strategy. So the VP of product is usually the one owning the product strategy. Business strategy might not be a consultant, could be someone, maybe a business designer, maybe a strategic designer, but most often it's a consultant. It's an outside consultant. There's a whole slew of agencies like doing this. And then the mission and vision is owned by the CEO. So that may change. You might be different. Maybe you're a startup. This is all the same person. That could be possible. Again, not always going to be the case, but this will give you a little bit of guidance. Just make sure you check with these people before you start those strategies. But this can be a little bit depressing. As I said, you're at the bottom of the totem pole, you're at the bottom of the food chain. But I think that's a good thing because if you haven't got any experience in UX strategy, I think pretty much any UX designer can create a UX strategy and it'll be okay. And it'll be like accepted. You have the agency to do it. So that's why I really think that UX strategy can be a gateway to much bigger strategies. So it's not really a stack. I'd say it's more of a staircase. Start with the UX strategy, work through there, then you can work your way up to a product strategy. And often if it's a really good UX strategy, it will just end up informing the product strategy and you can work your way up to the staircase. So that's how I recommend going about that.